everyone. Welcome to D2Football.com's Super Region 1 Playoff Podcast. Along with Kris Ferguson and Cary Moyer, I am Chuck Bitner. We'll be here for the next couple weeks to talk about the bracket in Super Region 1 for the 2025 Division II Football Championship. And guys, I'm really happy to have both of you here for the Super Region 1 coverage. If you've been with us for the last couple of years, Cary and I have done this as a duo, covering all four teams in the league, and really happy to welcome in some additional expertise to the room because with the CIAA back in Super Region 1, we, of course, had to have our guy, Kris Ferguson. Ferg, welcome to the Super Region 1 podcast.
Well, you know, this time of the year is the time of year that folks get into the transfer portal, and here I am.
Don't open with that. Don't open with the portal, man.
Ferg is channeling his Matt Witwicky energy this week. I think this is podcast number 4 for you this week, and just coming off a doubleheader for you tonight. So we really appreciate you being here. And of course, it is with good reason that Kris is here, because if you have been with us for a while, once again, we had some regional realignment in Division II. So we've talked about this on some of the other podcasts. The biggest change in SR1, the Great Midwest Athletic Conference, which has been part of the region for the last several years, that league has been moved into a revamped Super Region 3. And the CIAA, which spent the last several years in Super Region 2, which, if you know your geography, that's primarily southeast. CIAA moves back into Super Region 1, and I say back because there was a period around the 2010s where the CIAA was part of the region. So, and if you are new to this, of course, the rest of the membership in this region, the Northeast 10, primarily in the New England states, the Mountain East Conference, primarily West Virginia, a little bit of Ohio, and of course the Pennsylvania State Athletic Conference, with most of those institutions based in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So very happy to have all of those members as part of our region, and that produces this bracket for Super Region 1. Now, again, we're focusing just on the SR1 bracket and the SR1 teams. We may look at some of the other brackets as we go forward, but guys, this is our bracket for SR1. So we have a couple teams from the PSAC, 2 from the CIAA, 2 from the Northeast 10, and 1 from the Mountain East Conference. Now we're going to go into these matchups. We're going to profile all of the teams. But Cary, I want to start with you. Kris and I had opportunities to kind of give our overall reactions when the bracket had just rolled off the printer on Sunday night. When you were watching the selection show and we saw all 8 teams and we saw how the games lined up, overall first impressions when you saw this bracket?
Really, I don't think there were any major surprises with it. With my column the last couple of weeks, kind of tracking what we were seeing with first the alphabetical ranking and then the 1 to 10 rankings, and of course sliding in there at the end, not ranked with a number, but Bentley with winning the Northeast 10 with the way the format is this year, they got in. So seeing them kind of pairing up as the team going against the number 1 seed in Kutztown made sense, and I think the middle of the bracket kind of shook out the way we were anticipating. Of course, with Kris's CIAA teams there, really doing well, and then IUP coming in, to get that 4th seed. I think it kind of shook out as expected.
And Kris, kind of a good year for the CIAA to rejoin Super Region 1. I've been trying to think back several years. I know recently we've had some really strong representation from the CIAA, including winning some playoff games from teams like Virginia Union and Bowie State. But I was trying to rack my brain thinking back several years if we've had 2 teams that were this strong going into the postseason that potentially could even win the bracket.
Yeah, when you think about the CIAA in the playoffs, there's always like one team that comes in and they might get a home game. The other one's probably on the road. And so to see 2 teams, last week they were 2 and 3, just flipped. And, they already have played each other. The outcome's different. They basically flip spots. I mean, that's how how strong teams are. No, I don't think I can think of a time where we've had two CIAA teams both hosting games in the first round like this.
Yeah, pretty exciting achievement for the CIAA, and of course, I know you talked about the SIC last night. Really exciting times for them as well. This kind of got revealed when we were looking at the bracket for the first time on Sunday night. If everything goes the way it's supposed to by the seeding, and of course we know that rarely happens, but everything does go by the way it should with the seeding. In round 2, we would have 2 conference championship game rematches. We would potentially have IUP going back to Kutztown, a rematch of the PSAC championship game, and potentially have Virginia Union going to Charlotte to play Johnson C. Smith. That would be quite something if we had both of those align that way. So we'll take a look at the teams, and then we'll make our picks and see if we think that may actually happen. So, guys, let's talk about the teams. So we'll go through each one by one, and then we'll kind of look at making some picks on the 4 games coming up. We're going to start and go top down, make sure we get all of our good commentary and all of our energy on the front end to the teams in the seeded part of the bracket. Cary, Kutztown, the only 11-0 team, the only undefeated team, the only 11-win team in Super Region 1. Tell us a little bit about the Golden Bears.
Well, kind of a little foreshadowing there, as far as what we're looking like next week. If Kutztown wins, as I'm expecting them to, it's going to be a rematch game. They started out their season, and I was at that game. It started on Thursday night, ended on Friday morning after several weather delays, with Assumption, and then it, ended the season with the PSAC championship game last week, hosting IUP. A lot of games in between there. But again, Kutztown, the success they've had over, the last few years, 3-peating now. Again, Coach Clemens, and the way they build that team is they bring in high school guys and they develop them. They retain their guys. They're in the system. And, to me, it always starts up front. Same thing as last year between first and second team. All their offensive linemen are first or second team in the PSAC East. Chernecki and Elliott were some of our Elite 100 watch list guys coming in. On defense, 3 of their defensive linemen, including Redder, who was an Elite 100 guy for us, was the last year's PSAC Defensive Athlete of the Year. Also an All-American in wrestling at Division II level. They've got 3 guys, first team PSAC East. And that doesn't include the guy who was the MVP of the championship game last weekend. Linebackers are solid. Brendan Heil was the PSAC East Defensive Athlete of the Year. And 2 second-team guys, linebackers. I saw them play in high school, are both from Governor Mifflin with Johnson and Strausser. Coach Clemens, the coach of the year in the PSAC East, and a guy we talked about all the way back when we did our East and West preview shows, Judd Novak at quarterback. Again, doesn't have the big stats. All the dude does is win. And probably the most impressive stat is 0 interceptions throughout the season. And, offensively, 2 running backs there. Burkhart, he's a bruiser with finesse. I've seen him catch passes out of the backfield, turn on the speed. Jaden Stewart was a little banged up here at the end of the season, but he was second team PSAC East. And Maxwell, the tight end, first or second team PSAC East, but they put him in at fullback, and he bangs it on short yard situations. So, again, just group team effort there. And, the OC Quarterman, DC Fargo, those guys do a nice job, all the position coaches. And this is a solid team. And as far as the PSAC goes, without doubt, in my mind, the most consistent team throughout. Number 1 scoring offense, number 1 scoring defense. And all their games were somewhere in the 40s for the most part, giving up, a touchdown or at the end, or a touchdown and a field goal, just over 10 points a game average on defense. It's just the most consistent, solid, deep team, in the PSAC. So it's going to be really interesting. Again, it's staying healthy and going through, but it is a deep squad. and really excited to see where they go. Of course, a little hiccup last year. We know with that overtime loss that was unexpected. Slippery Rock did a nice job, but I expect the Kutztown Golden Bears to be in the Super Region 1 title game at the end.
Cary, they really were not challenged very much throughout the season. Nearly every game ended up being pretty one-sided until we got to the last couple weeks of the season. I think heading into the playoffs, where we know everybody's good, we're talking about conference championship teams. We're talking about teams that did a lot of winning throughout the season. I think it's really good for Kutztown that, of course, obviously we expected last week to be a tough game. But really the last two games, they had to win it with a defensive stop at the very end in the final minute. I think that's really good for them to have had to go through a little bit of, I don't want to necessarily adversity, because they really didn't trail very often all season. But as we get into the playoffs, we expect every game to be tough. Do you think this was really good for them to kind of get that seasoning a little bit heading into the playoffs?
Definitely. At the same time, too, you look early in the year, the second place teams in the East and the West. I mean, Shepherd turned it on, and their only loss in the East was to Kutztown, and Kutztown beat them 49-10. They also beat Edinburgh, who was in the conference or in the division tied with IUP in the West. Their only loss was to IUP, so hence IUP going to the game, and they beat Borough 34 to zip, and of course Shepherd beat East Stroudsburg the week before, so we didn't have two undefeated teams, but they beat East Stroudsburg 49-6. So to your point, Chuck, the having the win it with a very feisty, scrappy Bloomsburg team, and then same thing with IUP. I think that was good, because it's highly unlikely that you're having those 45, 49 point to 0 or 6, 10 point games throughout. So I think it was definitely good for them to kind of have that and battle a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. So K-Ferg, when you kind of look at Kutztown, I don't know if they have a ton of guys that make the fantasy picks, because they're so balanced and they have so many different players that contribute. But man, when you start looking at projecting the bracket, and obviously we're not going to gift anything to them yet, they have games to play, but knowing that this bracket most likely goes through Kutztown, this really looks like a tough out.
Yeah, because I mean, when you look at this team, right, on offense, when you can rack up 430 yards, the first thing I start thinking about is maybe you need to find a way to keep that offense off the field and on the sidelines. Yet you can't run on them, and that's been one of the staples of Kutztown over the last couple of years. Is like their run defense is always really good, and having the opportunity to keep up with them last year with VUU. I mean, they shut down a really strong running team, and really couldn't have any success early on in the game, and so. The fact that they kept that going, the fact that, Judd Novak is a very seasoned quarterback, that they have their own running game that can, force teams into uncomfortable positions and eat up clock. Man, that's a team that is just built for a really good playoff run.
No doubt. No doubt. So we expect to see Kutztown probably over the next couple of weeks, but we'll see. They still have games to play, and they've got an inspired Bentley team coming to town this week, and we'll talk about that game in just a few minutes. But let's go to the number 2 seed. As everyone expected coming into the season, number 2 seed in the region, Johnson C. Smith. And I say that in a little bit of jest, but Kris, this has been a process here in Charlotte. I don't know that we saw them perhaps winning the CIAA and getting into the playoffs and being a 2 seed, but they have been building up to this for a couple of years.
Yeah, when you think about, this wasn't on my bingo card. That just feels like a lot of what 2025 was, and this is another one that adds to that distinction here. When you think about Johnson C. Smith and you look at the key wins line, they took down the V's, VUU, VSU, Virginia State, and another VSU and Valdosta State. And I think, really that Valdosta game really made a lot of people pay attention to who Johnson C. Smith is. Their head coach, Maurice Flowers, I call him the quarterback whisperer because in many of his stops as offensive coordinator, then head coach, he's taken guys and he's made them into really good quarterbacks. And who you got on the screen is Kelvin Durham, who was a transfer from Fort Valley State, where that's where Coach Flowers' first head coaching job was before he took the job at his alma mater. You talk about fantasy, so from a fantasy perspective, Kelvin Durham is one of the two top quarterbacks in the CIAA for what he's been able to do, primarily with his arm and getting the ball downfield to a number of great receivers. The one that really truly stands out is Biggie Proctor, who was actually he was the most outstanding player in the CIAA championship game, had 145 yards of receiving. But he's got several other guys at wide receiver. Brian Lane also comes to mind. Reginald Daniel. These are guys. Brian Lane had I think he had multiple 100-yard receiving games this year. So it's it's kind of playing the hot hand there. JCSU got hurt, got a little banged up throughout the season. They lost their number 1 and number 2 running backs. But then Bobby T. Smith, a freshman, came onto the scene, and he's been really toting the rock for them throughout down the stretch. And actually landed a first-team CIAA for what he's been able to do in the running game. And they're not afraid to give it to him and let him run between the tackles. So, yeah, I mean, on offense, JCSU has a lot of options to play with. On defense, when you think about Vincent Hill, you think about TJ Taborn in the secondary, Ronte Dunbar, who transferred from Lincoln. Guys, I think you guys will like that. He was CIAA at Lincoln, transferred to JCSU, and he's had a pick 6 in the season. They got a lot of guys, Kadrika Stanley as well on the defensive line that could do a lot. And what they were able to do with VUU in the championship game in terms of stopping the run, committing to stop the run and letting their secondary kind of be on their own. They were athletic enough to make those plays on their own without a lot of help. It just shows how deep that they are and how much of a challenge that they're going to be in the first round.
They are going to be a handful. Maurice Flowers has done a remarkable job here, and he is a Charlotte guy. He is all in on this job and building up JCSU. He's actually the head coach at Olympic High School, which was the school district that I lived in when I lived in Charlotte a few years back. Ferg, we still have to see how things go throughout the postseason here, but as of the end of the regular season, Coach Flowers is the CIAA Coach of the Year. I think there's a really good case to be made for National Coach of the Year. Make an argument for it.
Well, when you take a team like JCSU, their championship was the second time that they've won the CIAA championship, the first time being 1971, I believe. Took a team that 3 or 4 years ago, losing record, perpetually losing record, and just started recruiting guys to buy into his philosophy and has built them up. And last year, they went 8-2, which is a great record. But the way that they sort of crashed out of the playoff conversation meant that if they were going to get over that hump, they had to be mentally tough as well as physically tough. And they've done that. I mean, they've had games, those last 2 games again this year against Fayetteville State and against Livingstone were games in which they had to do some fourth quarter heroics. He's made a way. He's a very innovative play caller, and to take this team and believe in this team and this school and get a lot of buy-in. I mean, it's hard to go against a coach like that. If you're talking about on the national stage.
No doubt. So, Cary, before we move on from this, as somebody who's so entrenched in the PSAC, when you start getting towards the second half of the year, I know you're always paying attention to what else is going on around my region because, I kind of want to know who the other top teams are that I might see in the playoffs. When you start thinking over the last couple of years about like, I need to be watching Johnson C. Smith and what they're doing. It's kind of a neat thing to have some newer programs that are really relevant in the playoff picture.
Oh, most definitely. And, JCSU, not a household name up here in the PSAC. So I've been very deliberate when I've been talking about, JCSU to folks up here saying Johnson C. Smith. So if they need to go Google it, they could find it. But it was just neat seeing them, getting into the top 25 as the season went on and just keep climbing the ladder going through. And again, Virginia Union, a little bit more known up here. Of course, they played up at Andre Reed Stadium, previously and stuff, but it's been neat. And again, it just, what a great story. Agree with the whole thing when you talk about what a coach has done and, looking at potentially national level. Agree. So maybe we'll see them up this way for the championship game.
Maybe so. I mean, our guy AC says he's got JCSU winning this region, so we'll see. Maybe we'll get to see them throughout a couple of rounds here if AC is right. So, all right. Well, let's go to our next team, and that was a team that I think we all did expect to be in the playoff picture. Virginia Union, of course, they finished the season at 9-2. Losses early in the season at Edward Waters. That was a road game when Edward Waters was really off to a hot start early in the season. And then the other loss just this past weekend in the CIAA championship game. So, Kris, I think we have gotten a little familiar with Virginia Union. Does this year's team resemble the teams we've kind of gotten to know over the past couple of years that won those CIAA championships and made some noise in the playoffs?
Well, in a lot of ways, yes. With VUU, their identity definitely starts on their offensive and defensive lines. Both have been really strong this year, and that's saying a lot given that they sustained heavy losses in the transfer portal after last season. I mean, there are quite a few guys who went to either Power 4 or BCS level schools, and quite a bit more that went to the FCS. But one guy who didn't go was the guy that you see on your screen. He is Agent Zero. He is Curtis Allen. He is the nation's leading rusher. He's about 2,100 rushing yards. We had VU had Jada Byers last year, who was a household name in Division II. He was the backup, and those who know how good he was, even in that backup role. So for him to be able to step into that role, he went to the transfer portal, he came back, and now he's it's not even close in terms of the nation's leading rusher. And a lot of the offense does go through VUU, but they consider themselves to be RBU because they have other running backs right behind Curtis Allen who can do a lot as well. So their identity is running the football. The 312 yards of rushing offense, from a little over 200 of that belongs to Curtis Allen. But also, when you think about them, I mean, their quarterback, R.J. Rosales, is more of a dual threat as well. Not a tall guy. He's only 5'8", but he is able to be very elusive when necessary, in addition to getting the ball down the field. And then, talking about the defense for VUU, only giving up 19 points a game. You talk about Ahmad Ross, who leads the Panthers in tackling, but also like Jameer Melendez as well in the secondary. Jaden Early in the secondary leads the Panthers in interceptions. They got a lot of guys who did come back, who have sort of also bought into that defensive philosophy for VUU. Which is, they slow down a lot of teams especially in the running game. And if they can get you off the field, they're going to find ways to limit your offense getting back onto the field because of their running game.
For sure. And so, Cary, I know it's a couple of years ago, but the identity of this team hasn't really changed a whole lot. You and I got to see Virginia Union up close at Kutztown. And again, this is 2 years back, but I think there's still some relevant conversation to be had there about the type of football that they play. And kind of things started off pretty badly for them, but when we got into the second half, that Virginia Union defense really locked down. And I think we started to see just how physical their style at the line of scrimmage can be. We would get into these moments. So for you, does this still look like a really dangerous team that could make a deep run with the style of play?
Definitely, and I'll return the kudos here that Kris had with Kutztown. A lot of the same things. Again, the ability to run the ball and play, very stubborn defense. And we did, and I gotta say it because I know Kris and I were back and forth on Twitter then, now X. But and I'm going to say this picture doesn't do it justice, but that cherry red chrome helmets they had that in the sunlight up there that day, those things were they were awesome. But they never really got going in that game, and it just kind of spiraled from there. But again, a lot of ball left to be played these next couple of weeks. But if it would end up being a Virginia Union matchup with KU back up at Andre Reed Stadium, I think it would be a fun one.
All right. I do too. All right. Let's go to the 4 seed. This will be the final of the seeded teams, and then we'll go on to the unseeded teams. So IUP, even with the loss last week at Kutztown, they do get a home playoff game, and we'll preview that matchup in just a few minutes. Kind of an interesting season here for the Crimson Hawks, Cary. I think at times we saw a very high ceiling, and I think at times we saw maybe they just sort of hit a plateau that they couldn't quite get over. So when you kind of look at their season overall at 7-3, some overall impressions of where this team is at heading into the playoffs.
I liked your word choice there. Again, I talked about KU and the consistency week in, week out. IUP definitely had some high points, but I don't ever think they really had one of those really unexpected drop-off weeks. Some of the inconsistency maybe that we saw with some of the other teams. And again, when you look at their schedule and who they played, of course, the hole in there that was left when Mercyhurst departed, one less game than a lot of the teams. But their home or their opener, their loss was to Ashland, which obviously is a force here now that we'll be talking about for weeks to come, I'm sure, with now into the playoffs. And that was a 13-9 loss. Their only loss in the divisional play was to Slippery Rock, and that was 30-27. And again, Rock had some really high games, and then they had some where they just had some rough goes on things. And of course then 28-23, nothing earth-shattering there as far as falling too far against a very good 11-0 Kutztown team in the PSAC championship game. And again, with IUP, I think it's it's been well touted. It's the passing game, and Reeve. We talked about a little bit. He actually came in as the second team quarterback in the PSAC West. But with Massey and Whitlock, 2 wide receivers, incredible wide receivers. Got to see them live last week. They're both first team PSAC West, and also a tight end at first team PSAC West. So, we talked about, with KU and with Virginia Union and run game, but, as far as how far IUP is going to go, it's going to depend on that passing game. And one of the key points I said going into the championship game last week was the passing game and that little thing of the ability to protect the passer. And again, Kutztown's defense, lights out. They had some success early on. That first drive I thought was a great drive. They had a lot of stuff on their knees, some little slip screen stuff. We're getting the yards after the catch. But when they had to go vertical against a very staunch, very aggressive defense. They struggled a little bit and ended up, I think, with giving up 6 sacks in the championship game. So, that's part of it. If you're, really going to make your stake with the passing game, you got to make sure you're going to be able to protect the passer too.
Yeah, it's really kind of been their undoing in all 3 of those losses. And I saw 2 of them up close. I was at the Slippery Rock game. I was at the Kutztown game. And pass protection is really the most critical thing that they have got to try to work on if they're going to advance through the playoffs here. But yeah, all 3 of those losses were by a couple of points. So they're really only a few plays away from being a little bit higher up in the seeding here. I think, Cary, I don't know, maybe I'm off on this, but I think IUP has more of a capacity to run the ball than what they've actually shown this year. I mean, it is kind of shocking to see that they only rush for 54 yards per game. A little bit of that is sack yardage because they've had a lot of negative yardage, but even if you take away the lost yardage, they still would be under 1,000 gross yards for the season. So it's just not a big part of the offense this year. But I have seen them play twice this season, and I think that they still have a capacity to run the football to a greater extent that they've shown. So we will see if perhaps that might be the case a little bit here in the postseason. And I will say I really like Gershio, the quarterback at Cary, and I think he's a really exciting football player. But I was pretty surprised that Reeve was not the first team quarterback in the West Division. So, but he plays on, and we will see the Crimson Hawks, and we'll preview their matchup with Assumption here in just a couple of minutes. And speaking of Assumption, they'll be the first of the unseeded teams that we'll preview. So Assumption comes in at 8-2, an at-large team out of the Northeast 10. They kicked off the season with a loss at Kutztown in a game. I know, Cary, you were at that. I think you mentioned it. It started on a Thursday, ended on a Friday with some gnarly weather. That ended up being a fairly comfortable Kutztown win by the end. But the Greyhounds then went on to win 7 games in a row. They were 7-1 heading into their crucial matchup with Bentley back on November 8th, a game that ultimately decided the Northeast 10 championship and the automatic bid to the playoffs. That went to the Falcons. Nonetheless, Assumption rounded out the season with a pretty lopsided win at Westchester, and they take their spot in the bracket as an at-large bid. When I started preparing notes for this and I was looking at Assumption, I had written down that I thought their quarterback, Jay Castleton, was probably one of the best players in the Northeast 10, offense or defense. And actually it was announced today, they rolled out their postseason awards. He was the league MVP, and that can go to either an offensive player or a defensive player. So I think I was right about that. He is recognized as probably one of the best players in the Northeast 10. But Jay was actually injured a little bit in that game at Bentley 2 weeks ago, and he did not play last week at Westchester. That is a big variable in their matchup that we're going to talk about, and I think it really impacts what their prospects can be in the postseason. Now, his backup did play very capably at Westchester. I don't think they had to ask a whole lot of him in that game. Golden Rams kind of made it easy, at least in the early part of the game. I don't think they had to ask a whole lot of him, but nonetheless, that is a big variable heading into this in the postseason. If Jay Castleton can play, I think that they've got a decent chance to compete with IUP. So we will see how that goes. Otherwise, though, they do still have a lot of their identity as being a pretty sound defensive football team. The player on the screen there is Owen Fitzgerald. He has had a huge season, over 100 tackles. That doesn't happen very often on a good football team. Usually guys that get those kind of stats, it's defenses that spend a lot of snaps on the field. Owen is just one of those players that tends to get to the football in a hurry. He is definitely one to watch. And the wide receiver, Connor Smith, he had a big game in that loss at Bentley. Very exciting football player. So I think Assumption could be a dangerous team here. They're definitely going to be an underdog, but Cary, you saw them back in the opening week of the season. I know that ended up being a fairly lopsided loss, but certainly in the early going, I think you got to see a Greyhounds team that is very talented overall.
Definitely. And, speaking to your point about QB1 there, I mean, that was a conversation point all the way back in game one, in his ability. And obviously he had a great season, being the conference player of the year. So, KU and Assumption have opened up with each other the last few years, and this was probably the most lopsided. Again, I don't put a lot of stock in that with whatever it was, the 3 delays and coming out. It's kind of like starting over again, and throw halftime in there, and you got we came back. I think we did 1 play, so it's like all those stoppages of play. But they definitely put together a nice run during the season. We have another Northeast 10 team that we'll talk about in a minute, with Bentley. So, Westchester, you mentioned them. I think they're the Kevin Bacon of this conversation because that was a common opponent. But no, they finished off strong. And Bentley opened with Westchester. Assumption ended with Westchester. And I mean, really, Assumption was kind of just what I was thinking all the way through as we started getting to the second half of the season, looking at knowing that a Northeast 10 champion is going to be in there. I was kind of just like already prepping for that. Probably they may be the lone representative of the Northeast 10. Of course, in that head-to-head game, they dropped that to Bentley. So Bentley snuck in, getting that automatic bid as the champion. But, coming out of Northeast 10, I know they lost the head-to-head, but, I think Assumption is on pretty solid ground. Again, whatever the situation is with injuries, that's for every team at this point, who's healthy when. But no, I think they're going to be a great representative of the Northeast 10, and I think they're very deserving to be in this field of 8 that we have this year.
No doubt. K-Ferg, were you able to get Owen Fitzgerald added to your fantasy team while Cary was talking?
Oh man, if only you could put defense on there. I think you made a good point about the quarterback situation. Just looking back at what they were able to do at Westchester, Dom Santiago, the backup. 9 passes completed for 258 yards. I mean, that's a lot of production out of very little passes, a lot of efficiency. But man, you just wonder if IUP goes up 2 scores, I mean, and you're dependent on the pass game, they get to lock in on that. And they're not offering a ton of a yard. So I think that's something that concerns me on in the run game that IUP is offering. But because that's a strength for Assumption to me, is that run game.
Right. Yep, I agree. And Greyhounds are led by head coach Andy McKenzie. He's been the head coach there for about 7 or 8 years. Today announced as the Northeast 10 Coach of the Year. So congrats to him. He's also part of the Super Region 1 selection committee and part of the national committee. So overall, good guy. So congrats to him and his team for making the playoffs. And we'll preview their matchup with IUP in just a couple of minutes. So let's go to our next team. Cary, back to the PSAC, the Cal Vulcans. Really interesting season that they've had. Again, a team that we've seen maybe a high ceiling from them, but we've also seen where they have some struggles. And again, a team that's had some injury problems, had some problems kind of figuring out the quarterback position a little bit. But another team that when you kind of look at, some quality wins, but also maybe some head scratching losses in there as well.
Definitely. And again, I feel it's kind of a little bit of deja vu. It's kind of at the point where we were at last year with the Super Region 1 playoffs, and the health, things were a factor, whether it was Boyd or they had, at running back, they had guys that were banged up on defense last year. Again, comes back to who's healthy when. But, the difference of, we talked about IUP a little bit ago, and, when they did have some missteps, it wasn't, really, epic types of missteps. With Cal, they had that loss with Seton Hill 16-7. They lost to Edinburgh, who, of course, their only loss in the division was to IUP. They lost to them 33-29. Lost to IUP. Again, that's, they were the representative from the West. That was 38-30. And, one thing in there too, with, looking at our Super Region 1, they did have the win over Frostburg State, 31-26. So, I think that's, when you're talking about like-minded competition, the folks that are in here for Super Region 1, I think that was a key win. So, again, they have the ability, though, to put things together. Not a whole lot of over-the-top selections in the PSAC West as far as, first or second team selections. But, again, they're pretty much here every year, So, and again, I know, with Coach Dunn and what they do out there is they find ways to win. So sometimes that's a little bit dangerous. So it's you don't have the script exactly that you can pinpoint what this team is about, but they find a way to win.
Yeah, and congrats to them for being able to get some tough competition on their schedule too. I mean, it's already hard enough to play through the PSAC West, especially this year because of the way Clarion and Edinburgh elevated themselves and became serious challengers. And then you throw on top of that, you played the two best teams in the Mountain East, picking up games with Charleston and then adding the Frostburg date as well. So, they really went out and challenged themselves to see if they could get back to this position. So congrats to them for doing that. I think it's a team that's had to really kind of, at times find its identity a little bit, losing Bobby Boyd to injury during the Slippery Rock game, which they won, one of their best players. Unfortunately, he has not been back in the lineup since then. And they really haven't missed much of a beat. That's not to say they don't miss Bobby Boyd. They certainly do, but they've still been very productive and even, kind of trying to figure out what's the right solution for them. What's the best fit with the quarterback? Because that's been a little bit of a question mark. They've still been able to win games and get back to this position. So I think it's a team that, to your point, Cary, they're finding ways. And I think that makes them very dangerous. So we'll talk about their matchup with Virginia Union here coming up. But I think that's a really interesting matchup that they have. And I think maybe Cal's defense is really kind of improving at the right point in the season here as well. They've got a couple of guys that have really come on, even, enduring a few injuries on that side of the ball as well. So I think Cal could be one of those teams. We'll see. They've got a tough game to get through. But if there's a bracket buster in here, I think maybe it's Cal. So I think they potentially have the ceiling and have the talent to go on the road and win some playoff games. Kind of an interesting scenario here, though, Ferg. I mean, last year they got to play all their playoff games at home, and they ended up playing something like, from last year into this year, they played something like 7 or 8 total games at home. It will be different for them having to go on the road this year.
Yeah, and I was looking at their schedule too. Like 2 of those 3 losses were on the road. They had 6 home games, but those 2 big losses, Edinburgh and IUP, were on the road. So is this a team that is a little different on the road versus being comfortable at home? And will be something I'm certainly interested to see as well.
All right, so we'll talk about their matchup with Virginia Union. It's actually going to be the final game that we will discuss. So a couple more teams to preview until we get there. So we will go to Frostburg State. Bobcats come in at 9-2. They get the automatic bid from the Mountain East Conference. And of course, they are the only representative out of the MEC this year. Bobcats started the season 5-0, opened with a big win at home over Shepherd. But the next 4 opponents were teams that didn't do a whole lot of winning this year. So I will admit, guys, when they were sitting there at 5-0, I wasn't quite willing yet to consider them as a legit top 25 team or a playoff contender. And I will admit that also goes back a little bit to last year because it felt very familiar to where they were last year at 6-0, albeit against some pretty bad competition. And in that 7th game, they kind of got blown out by Charleston. And that was a game that I was at. It ended up being the start of a 5-game losing streak. And I was a little concerned that this, maybe not go off the wheels quite like that, but maybe it's going to trend in that same kind of direction. When they took the loss to Glenville State in overtime, I thought, well, yeah, it's probably going to head down that same road again. But they bounced back. They got the 3-0 win over Charleston, beat a good Wheeling team who's always been a contender since joining the Mountain East. And they had a really good showing at California. They lost that game, but I thought it was a really good showing for them. And they had to play that game with like their 3rd or 4th string quarterback. They've started a couple of different players at the quarterback position. So, when you have to go into that Cal game with a freshman who I believe was making his first start and really kind of seeing his first meaningful snaps, when you add that all up and it was a 1-score game, it was a pretty good showing for them. I think that can give them a lot of confidence that they can go compete here in the bracket. So Jordan Brooks has been the quarterback who took most of the snaps this year. He did miss that Cal game, but he did come back and start the last couple, and he did, I believe, take all the snaps at Fairmont State a year ago. So it is a good football team. I think their defense is also something that they can really rely on in going on the road. I took a couple of looks at their defensive line. Rainier Haviland, really impressive player. Really liked what I saw from him. They have a strong physical run game. So, Cary, I know for you, you're an old offensive line guy, and I know you and I are very much aligned that everything starts up front. And when you look at Frostburg, a team that doesn't necessarily have flashy numbers in any particular category, but they play a line of scrimmage brand of football.
Definitely. And again, that comes down to, their stats, and then there's the one that matters, and it's the W. And again, when you talk of playing out of conference games, they played 3 PSAC teams, and, they beat Shepherd 41-27. And of course, Shepherd had that rough start, lost to Kutztown. Then they ran the rest of the table in the PSAC East and in their last crossover game. So, okay, Millersville, again, a little bit of a down year for the Bill, but they beat them 42-34. And then, again, the game with Cal, again, to play a team of that caliber, later in the season. And again, that was a 31-26 game. So, no, I understand the skepticism. It is the bottom going to drop out of this, but, they made it through and, finished out strong. And, again, it's a little bit newer here than a Cal, that they played, but again, they're in the show. They're in the show.
Yeah, K-Ferg, we kind of celebrated this a little bit on Sunday night, but I think overall we're happy to see Frostburg State here because their trajectory certainly has been building up to this ever since they started their first transition year from Division III, and they were a 10-1 team in one of the years that unfortunately they were not eligible to participate in the postseason. So they've been building up to this. It's their first time here, but it seems like they really have been prepared for building a team that can compete in the playoffs.
Yeah, and to think about too that that also occurred over 2 head coaches for them, and so. For them to be able to sustain that level of success and build on that, a really big deal. It's just very exciting and refreshing to see, them reach the playoffs for the first time.
Yeah, big accomplishment for them, and I think that they will be a very strong representative for the Mountain East Conference. All right, fellas, well, let's round out the field in Super Region 1 with the champions of the Northeast 10, the Bentley Falcons. Of course, they got the automatic qualifying bid. Kind of funny how this worked out, guys, because going into that game, at the time, they were only a 5-win team, and they actually end up being one of the first teams in the entire country to clinch a playoff bid. So that's how the automatic qualifications can really transform the last couple of weeks of the regular season. Pretty fascinating how that works out, but very interesting path here to the postseason. They're in some ways kind of like the Valdosta State of the Northeast. They started the season 0-3. Now, one of those was an FCS opponent, so of course we expected that, but they opened the year with losses to Westchester and Franklin Pierce. Both of those were at home. Both of those were by double digits, got blown out by Bryant. Cary, I have some more talking points here on Bentley, but when they're sitting there at 0-3 and they've been blown out by Westchester and Franklin Pierce, at that point, we are not looking at them as a playoff team at all, are we?
No, and where Westchester was at in the beginning of the season had some injury, issues and stuff, and kind of tailed off a little bit. But that series has been an opening, whether it was here or up at Bentley. That series has been going on a long time, and those have been some pretty good games. But and Franklin Pierce, I believe the Rock played them early on too, and had a find a way to win that as well. But Bentley again, we've seen New Haven a lot. Now, New Haven has certainly, moved on, but, Bentley's been one of the top teams in the Northeast 10, pretty consistently as well. So, and again, hey, we have the 8 teams now, and, the conference champion of each gets in. They found a way to get in. I kind of talked about a little bit earlier. It's like they're not even on the radar. They're not in the alpha listing. They're not in the 1 to 10 listing at all. But you win the conference championship and you got in. So, but Bentley, I've seen them play live a few times over the years, and they're a good football team. So, they've earned their way in, and again, they beat Assumption, who we just talked about, and they're in the show.
Their defense really came to life in the second half of the season. Through the first 5 games, they gave up an average of 32.4 points per game. Over the last 5 games, that number drops to 10.2 points per game, with a high of 17, and the 17 was Assumption. So, man, congrats to them for the way they really figured that out and improved on defense to be able to get themselves into the playoff. And that's really led by Henry Shelton, all NE10 linebacker, number 45. Watch for him in the game at Kutztown, Cary. 112 tackles in 10 games for a winning football team. That is impressive. That is some high production. Again, normally when you see that number of tackles, it's on a team that isn't very good. So some amazing production from Henry this side. Some others to watch for: defensive lineman Jake Fredericks. He really stood out in the Assumption game. Mike DePlacido, he leads the team with a couple of interceptions. On the offensive side of the ball, what I like about them, which could be an advantage or at least something that could give Kutztown some trouble, we'll talk about this shortly. They have a couple of really good wide receivers: Isaiah DeSias, Rashawn Bradford. Bradford was an Elite 100 watch list player. In fact, I think he was a first teamer. But DeSias actually ended up being the Northeast 10's Offensive Player of the Year, and he was only able to play in 6 games. So that's the kind of impact that he has. And he was a huge weapon in that game against Assumption. So they have some weapons. Luke Warnock is in his first season as a starter. He's played pretty well. You will occasionally see Isaiah Osgood. He's their backup quarterback, a situational player that they'll bring in mostly in rushing situations, but they do let him throw the ball a little bit as well. So watch for that. Really good football team overall that has continuously improved throughout the season. So it's really not an accident that they're on this 7-game winning streak. And congrats to head coach CJ Scarpa, rookie head coach in his first year. He is a Bentley alumnus and a former Bentley quarterback as well. So great job by the Falcons to turn their season around, and that culminates in a playoff bid. So, guys, that is our field for Super Region 1. And they will be playing some football games this weekend. So let's take a look at the matchups. And we'll start with Bentley going to Kutztown. I think on paper, this is probably considered a mismatch. I don't know. K-Ferg, what do you think here? What if you're Bentley, what do you think you're looking to do against this Kutztown defense?
Well, you would think that you might attempt to establish the run. That may be a little tough. You might need to go to a bit of a quick passing game, because I expect Kutztown to really sort of use that physical defensive line to disrupt the timing of passes. So, Bentley's got to find a way to counter what's likely to be an aggressive defense, and that's without probably having to really truly blitz in something like this. I agree. I think that this is a situation that it feels like a mismatch in a lot of ways. Bentley's also got to keep this game relatively lower scoring and play a little bit of chess here and take advantage of whatever mistakes that Kutztown makes to their advantage to hang in this game for a while. But, we talked about it already. Kutztown is on a roll when it comes to how many points they're putting up on opponents. And I think that's what's going to happen in this game.
Yeah, I think that's probably the way it's likely to go. I think the one thing that could give me some hope for Bentley is the receivers that I just talked about. And one of the ways that an underdog like Bloomsburg was able to have some success against Kutztown is because they have some really good playmakers at the wide receiver position. Some guys that can really stretch the field, some possession receivers that can really create space. And of course, IUP has a whole host of wide receivers that were successful as well. So I think there is an opportunity there for Bentley to move the ball a little bit and perhaps score some points. But the one thing, Cary, that I think we don't necessarily appreciate enough about Kutztown, because that 10.45 on the screen kind of dominates the conversation, but that 41.73 is awfully impressive too.
It is. And again, it's 3 phases of the game. I love to gravitate up front, but, the special teams end of it, is Kutztown has shown it throughout the season, ability to block punts, block, extra points, block field goal attempts, make things happen in the extra, in the special teams as well. And they're just that differential that Kutztown has, of what they score versus what they give up. Yeah, I'm going to say it. This may be the most lopsided game that we're going to see out of any of them in Super Region 1 with the Golden Bears winning.
Yep. All right. So I think we're all picking Kutztown in that one, but we'll see if the Falcons can come in with a good competitive effort and maybe take this into the fourth quarter. All right, let's go to our next game, and we'll stay with the Northeast 10 against the PSAC. We have Assumption traveling to IUP. So, Cary, I'll kick it back to you. I'm thinking IUP will be the more talented football team and will be a little bit deeper. I think for them, a lot this week depends on just overall what their mindset is like. The PSAC championship game, they were the underdog. I think a lot of people expected Kutztown to win, but they certainly didn't expect to lose. So it is deflating. It is disappointing, but you do kind of get that total reset here going into the playoffs. So if IUP can kind of put that game behind them and refocus and put everything into playing this game, I think they're just going to be the better football team. But I think, it's not always easy to get over a game like that.
No, and I think, last week, IUP had a couple things where, maybe they set themselves back a little bit with some certain plays. But again, Coach Tord and the IUP staff, and again, they're just used to being here. And, it's a new season now. And I think IUP is going to take care of business at home with this one.
Yeah, I think if I'm on the coaching staff there, I put that bracket up on the screen and I say, guys, look, let's take care of our business. Let's prepare all week. Let's win this football game. And then we're going right back to Kutztown and we'll beat them when it matters more. So I'm going to preach that all week long to make sure that they're in a good mindset and practice well. I think if they do, they should win the game here. So, K-Ferg, maybe there's an angle here for Assumption, but what do you think? Is this a pretty comfortable IUP win?
Yeah, and I think it's going to be because of IUP's ability to pass the ball. I mean, that's what Bentley did to get some traction on Assumption was the passing game. And IUP has quite a few weapons to do that. I'm actually kind of curious to see if IUP would try to do a little bit of running in this game, but I also think that might be a bit of a strength for Assumption is their run defense. But hey, they don't necessarily need it. I think if you have an angle for Assumption is that they've just got to find ways to get it to their playmakers, and they need their quarterback. They need their leading quarterback to play this game.
No doubt. And this actually is the second time that these two have met in the playoffs. They played back in 2017. That was Coach Tort's first year at IUP as the head coach. And that was a really competitive football game. Assumption actually had a lead until the last couple of minutes of the fourth quarter. So would be awesome if we get a similar type of game this time around as well. So let's go to a Mountain East Conference versus CIAA matchup, something we don't get to see a whole lot. I think Livingstone played Charleston earlier this year. I don't know. We have a ton of crossover with the two leagues. I don't know. K-Ferg, I'm really, really curious about this. I don't think I have a good read on how these two teams will match up. Overall impressions that you have on this one?
Well, when I look at Frostburg, they can put up a lot of yards. They can do it with their wide receivers. They can do it in the run game. Um, and JCSU, I would say they're a little bit more measured in their approach. That I think down the stretch, they, really sort of relied on playing keep away from the opposing offense and sort of milking the clock to keep them away and trying it that way. And so, but they can put up a lot of points in bunches as well, and has a really strong defense on top of that. Um, if I'm Frostburg, I am curious to see how they do in the red zone. Um, Teams that can put up a lot of yards, but only scoring 32, 33 points a game on average. Um, Generally, the concern ends up being when you get inside the 20. They are 36 for 55 in the red zone, 9 of 18 in the kicking game. So to me, it's what can they do against JCSU in the red zone that really stands out to me. If you're Johnson C. Smith, I think you definitely want to see more of what you got against VUU in the championship game than what you got against more of the Livingstone Fayetteville States, where it's like this low scoring kind of a lull. You get behind and you're giving the other team hope, and then you've got to scramble to get down the field, and you're taking a lot of risk there, and sometimes that risk doesn't work out, and certainly not the playoffs. You just don't want to put yourself in that situation. In the end, these are both teams that are in the playoffs for the first time, so I expect both of them to have some jitters here, because if you lose, you're done, right? And I'm going to go with JCSU to get to the second round, primarily on the strength of their pass defense.
So, Cary, when you look at this one, Johnson C. Smith is coming into this right off of the biggest win they've had in half a century. Huge moment for them, winning the CIAA championship over, a Virginia Union team that's very well regarded. Really good looking atmosphere that they had there in Durham. Just a huge moment for that team. They have to move on from that really quickly to get ready for a good Frostburg State team. And I think we've sometimes seen playoff games can be fickle. Sometimes they're very well attended. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes that environment works in favor of a visiting team. So we just never really know what to expect sometimes with these. So I think if I'm Frostburg State, I kind of really like this opportunity to go on the road and maybe think I can match up with them, and maybe I can even catch them at a moment that's a little disadvantageous for them.
Yeah, for me, I've kind of been, tracking with Frostburg, pretty much throughout the season. Again, having all those crossover games with the PSAC teams. But again, it's like, okay, Johnson C. Smith and where they started to come on, I think they're going to ride it. I really do. I think they're on a high. I don't think they're going to, have any kind of letdown. And I'm going to go with Johnson C. Smith in this one.
I'm going to go with the Golden Bulls as well. What I'm going to be watching for is their passing offense, which is pretty darn good, against a Frostburg State passing defense that is number 2 in the country in efficiency. Passing defense efficiency, which is a really awkward phrase to say, but they're very good in passing defense is what that means. They actually have more interceptions than passing touchdowns allowed. So they're pretty good at defending the pass. So I'm very curious to see how that will match up in this meeting this Saturday. And then we'll go to our final matchup, Cal going to Virginia Union, and I want to kick it to you guys to get your reactions, but I really like this matchup. I'm very, very interested. I was very tempted to go to this one. I picked a different one to go to, but I was very tempted to go to this because I think this could be a really fascinating matchup. I'm going to start with you, Cary. What are you looking for in this one?
See, it's so tough with the PSAC and with Cal, and again, it's which Cal team are we going to get? And then just, having seen Virginia Union, and I think Kris did a nice job of saying their brand of football hasn't changed. And, I'm really torn with this one. I really am. And it's almost flip the quarter on this one. But
I'll tell you what, Cary, I'll give you a moment of reprieve before I put you on the spot to make your pick, and then we'll go to K Ferg for what he thinks. The Gary Dunn show is done every week with head coach Gary Dunn at California. That's on Vulcan Vision and CUTV. They do fantastic work with their content.
yes.
Let's hear what Gary Dunn had to say, particularly about Virginia Union, as he starts to break them down.
I think they like us last year went to the regional finals and came up a little bit short, but really well coached football team on both sides of the ball. They're going to run the ball. They got one of the premier tailbacks in the country who's probably up for the Harlan Hill. They are going to run the ball. He's a big back, but he's elusive. Kind of reminds me of Najee Davenport for the Steelers had. He's nimble on his feet, but he's a powerful runner. So everything starts with their running game. Then they're going to get into play action shots when they get you committing to the run. They've got a good bootleg package. I think their quarterback's a really athletic guy, really tough kid that'll run the ball, will throw the ball. You can tell he's a competitor. Offensively, that's what they're going to do. They're really good at what they do. I think defense. I think they play complementary football. They're a base 4-2 down, base 4 down. 4-2 box. They're going to play quarters coverage. They're going to play man coverage on third downs. I think they try. They're not a huge blitz team or haven't shown to be a huge blitz team. They're going to keep everything in front of them, and they're going to try and shorten the game with their run game. But they've got some explosive athletes. They're extremely well coached. It's fun when you're playing somebody new, but it's also, I wouldn't mind Sunday night playing somebody we've played because it cuts your prep time down. But it's a good football team.
Yeah, so I think some of the unknowns there and preparing for a team this good are a little bit scary. And I would love to have gotten some comments from the other side from Coach Parker, because I know they also do a weekly presser. Ran out of time and talent to go to pull that together, but maybe we'll be able to pull that in for the post game. So I don't know, Cary, was there anything that you pull out of that from Coach Dunn that helps you make your pick?
I'm going to go with Virginia Union at home.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Virginia Union at home as well. I think this is a really good spot for them. I do think this is a tough matchup. I really do. I think that California has some guys on defense that can really rise up and meet the moment here against a very good Virginia Union run game, but I think that they can really push them. But I do like the Panthers to win this at home. So, K Ferg, what do you think?
Well, Cary, you now join the distinction of going and get your own conference group of us, and so welcome. We know what VU is, right? And to me, it's a lot more of a question because of the way like the PSAC minus KU has been. They've been very hot, very cold, very up, very down. You don't know what you're going to get from week to week, and but you know what VU is. You know it's Curtis Allen is the number one option, and how they mix up packages. If they sense that, hey, you're loading up the box, we're going to throw an offensive lineman in the backfield to try to spring him free and everything that Coach Dunn said. Cal, I'm a little concerned because I'm just like, what is Cal's identity on offense? I mean, they kind of pass the ball sometimes, they run the ball sometimes, but I mean their passing numbers in general are relatively low, but I just don't know what they are, and so to me I always go with the safe pick here, and that's VUU on something like this, especially when you got to go on the road.
Yeah, I have some of those same concerns, Kris. I think Cal's done a very good job of kind of enduring through some games where they maybe didn't really have a good feel for what their identity was in some of those games. I think this is one of those games that you have to really know what you're going to rely on to win this game on the road at Virginia Union. I don't know that we quite have a lot that we feel like this is what Cal's going to be successful at on the road against a quality team they can get the win. But we do know that Cal is a very talented football team overall. They have an outstanding coaching staff, and they will have a good game plan, and we'll see what they can come up with for this one. So those are our 4 games on the schedule for this week. So that will be the show for round number 1. And as we bring this to a close, just a real quick recap. There is our Super Region 1 bracket. There's all 4 of your matchups. And if you are intellectually curious and want to get outside the region, of course, you got your Super Region 2 bracket. Some really good representation there from the SIAC. This was a kind of a bracket buster where we had a Valdosta State sneaking in with an AQ. We had a North Greenville sneaking in with an AQ. Some teams that really were not necessarily in the picture. So that's going to be a very interesting bracket to follow. And then, of course, Super Region 3. Some real heavy hitters that will come out of that region. Of course, our defending national champs, Ferris State, reside in that region. They've got the home field advantage. And then in Super Region 4, I think this is a very competitive one. We unpacked it on Sunday night. I think everybody's got eyes on that Northwest Missouri against Harding matchup. Everyone's really excited about that. But honestly, I think all 4 of these have a lot of intrigue. So that will be the show for this week. You can find us on the socials. He's D2K Ferg. I'm D2 Chuck. And of course, Cary Moyer. That's how you can find us. We will be out at games this weekend. Kris, you're going to be in Charlotte.
Yep.
Cary will be in Kutztown. I'm actually stepping out of region. I will be in Ashland for the Ashland Eagles and UMD Bulldogs. So really looking forward to that. We will be back next week. Time, date, and all that to be confirmed, possibly in the same location. But we will be back next week to review all the games that we just talked about and then prepare for the semifinal roundup around in the regional bracket. And we will look forward to seeing you back here next week. And be sure to tune in on Sunday night for Inside D2 Football, where we will recap all of the action from around the country. So appreciate you watching. Appreciate all the support. We'll see you again next time around.